Hi everyone, welcome to Potential Synergy. I'm Toonie and thank you for being here. So my husband and I are taking a trip, and what's special about this trip is that I'm carrying my handy dandy camera with me, which means I'm gonna have a bulky camera bag. This one. In addition to that bulky camera bag, I also want to have a bag of essentials, a bag for my phone, my wallet, my keys, my passport because we're traveling abroad, and possibly my water bottle. You know, I want to have a small bag that can accompany the big camera bag, but also I'm not planning on carrying my camera everywhere I go. So there are days that I will not have my camera with me, and I just want a bag that can carry my water bottle in addition to my essentials. So despite all the bags that I've made, I couldn't find the right bag. As a result, I had to make another one. If you've seen the thumbnail, you know we're talking about the Ojyma Crossbody, and this pattern is from Country Cow Designs. I bought the pattern because I thought it was interesting, but I just hadn't made it until today, actually. And I love it so much that I'm over here in this corner of my sewing room, because every other corner is a hot mess, to share with you my experience. So first we're going to talk about the back features, and then I'm going to talk about my version, any modifications that I made, any issues or challenges that I encountered while making this bag, and also we're going to try to put all the things that I want to put in the bag and see if they all fit. All right, let's have a look. Here's the bag. Ah! This bag is Rainbow Explosion, y'all, and it's perfect. All right, let's start with the key features. So this bag measures 9 inches tall. I'm looking at my notes here. 8 inches wide and 3 inches deep. And it is a crossbody bag with lots of different kinds of pockets. So if you're learning how to make bag pockets, this is a great bag to learn those techniques. And I'm going to go through the different types of pockets with you momentarily. The pattern maker labeled this bag as an intermediate bag, and she mentioned that it's mostly because of the curves and also binding. I have bound bags before, so I am sort of familiar with binding. My binding is not perfect, and I'll show you what it looks like in this bag. But I do think that it is a great skill to learn, and it gives your bag a nice structure. And many times, if you have options between binding and, let's say, drop-in lining, I think binding is ultimately easier to do. I'm going to give you an overview of my version of the bag. So this is the front of my bag. It has a cargo pocket with a magnetic snap. And then on the back, in the pattern, you will have a slip pocket with a magnetic snap closure, but I follow the pattern hack. So I added a zipper pocket instead. And I'll talk about some challenges that I encountered in a moment. But there are instructions for this pattern hack on the website, and I'll link to that page in my description as well. I think it's really cool. So that's a panel that you could try if you want to. When we open the bag, we have a slip pocket, and there's an interesting way to make this slip pocket. Can you see? I'll show you in a moment. And then the other side has a zipper pocket with a pocket overlay. This is my first time doing this, and I've learned a few things, so I want to share that with you as well. And of course, the bag is finished with binding. In terms of materials, I use waterproof canvas here, and this is vinyl. It's like faux suede, I think. It's very soft and plushy. It's not super thick. However, I did struggle a little bit with this material, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. The material I use for the lining is, I think it's called ripstop waterproof canvas. I think I got this from Fabric Wholesale Direct. And for my binding, I use fold over elastic. I use fold over elastic because I have a lifetime supply. In terms of my strap, I use just seatbelt webbing from Wonderground Fabric. In terms of interfacing, I just follow the pattern and use foam for the most part and Decoville light on the flap. I didn't interface my vinyl or my waterproof canvas with woven interfacing. I didn't need to. But other than that, I basically just followed the instructions on the pattern. For me, this bag was a lot of fun to make. There were a few steps towards the end, like binding and putting things together when seams got a little bit bulky, that things got a little stressful. But other than that, making the pockets was a lot of fun, and I learned a few things as well. In my opinion, Country Cow Designs makes really great patterns, and they are really careful about their measurements and their pattern pieces, and they're really helpful if you have any questions. They also have video tutorials for, I think, all of their patterns, all their new ones anyway, so you can check them out. I'll put a link to their website and their YouTube channel in the description for you. Before y'all get bored with my rambling, let's take a closer look on the Ojyma Crossbody. To start off, let's look at my binding. Now, I didn't use contrasting threads so you could see my mistakes more easily. I was just too lazy to change my thread. Because I used fold over elastic, I sewed both sides of the binding in one go, and occasionally I wouldn't catch the bottom side, so I had to go back and restitch. This is quite typical for binding. You have to go back and restitch sometimes, which is why it is a great idea to use a thread color that blends in with your binding. So the pattern suggests that when you attach the front and the back to the binding, you use a scant 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then when you sew the binding to cover the raw edges, you use a full 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I, however, prefer to sew the front and the back to the binding with a 1/4 inch seam allowance first, and then use a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance when I sew the binding onto the bag. I really like using fold over elastic for binding. One technique that I find helpful with fold over elastic as binding is to tug on it slightly as I stitch the binding onto the bag. This gives the binding a snug fit as a result. Next, we're going to look at each panel of the bag. So we're going to start with the interior slip pocket. This one is special because it has vinyl at the top. You could use vinyl, leather, or cork. To secure the top edges of the slip pocket, I also added rivets. This pocket is really nice. It has plenty of room. I have a big iPhone. I think I have an iPhone Pro Max. I don't remember which model, but it fits in there. Now we're going to turn the back over to the other side. And this one has a zipper pocket with a zipper overlay. So this is a new way for me to make a zipper pocket. Because I cut the vinyl overlay by hand, it didn't look too perfect. I think if you have a cutting machine or Cricut or something like that, the overlay piece will look a lot better. In terms of the technique itself, I think this is a great way to make a zipper pocket. It does give a more elevated look to your bag, and in my opinion, it is not harder to make than a typical zipper pocket. So if you haven't made a zipper pocket this way before, I suggest you give it a try. And now it's time to turn the bag right side out. With my materials and interfacing, it wasn't hard to turn the bag right side out, but I heard that if you use stiff waterproof canvas on top of Decoville light, it would be quite challenging to turn the bag right side out. So please keep that in mind. Now let's inspect the quality of my final assembly. So I made a little boo-boo in that corner, and if you know vinyl, you know that holes are permanent. This is something to keep in mind when choosing materials for your bag, especially if you're a beginner and you're still learning the techniques. Mistakes are not as easily forgiven when using vinyl, leather, or cork. But hey, overall, I did pretty good at attaching the front and the back to the gusset panel. I think I may have one pleat over there and then a tiny teeny one at that corner as well, but other than that, it looks pretty good. I'm not worried about those pleats. They're at the bottom of my bag. Nobody's gonna care. So let's move on. Here's the front exterior panel. For the magnetic snap, I used a rivet snap. The male side goes on the flap and the female side goes on the cargo pocket. And I used Decoville light for the stabilizer on the flap. I added a small scrap piece of Peltex when I attached the female magnetic snap to the cargo pocket. For the materials, I used waterproof canvas on the cargo pocket, the exterior, and also the lining. And I used vinyl for the exterior main panel. Just in case you were wondering about my tag, this came from Ever Emblem. They have a lot of cute designs. I'm not affiliated. Anyway, I placed the bottom of my tag 2 inches and 3/8 of an inch. Is that how you say it? 2 inches plus 3/8 of an inch from the bottom of the cargo pocket because the seam allowance is 3/8 of an inch. So I thought I wanted a little bit more space between the bottom and the tag. And I think it looks pretty good. Next, we're going to look at the exterior back panel. In the original pattern, the exterior back panel has a simple slip pocket with a magnetic snap closure. I decided to make a zipper pocket instead, so I followed the Ojyma pattern hack, which is a blog post on countrycowdesigns.com. Now, if you've seen the blog post, you may notice that my panel is a little bit different. Instead of having the opening on the left side of the panel, I wanted mine on the right side. I am right-handed and I think that it is more accessible to me to have the pocket opening on the right side. I'm mentioning this because in the blog post, the instructions say to cut one exterior left piece and then they give you the measurements, and also to cut one exterior right piece and then they give you the measurements for that one. Since my zipper is on the right side, my left piece and my right piece measurements have to be swapped. However, I didn't do that, so I cut my short piece on the left side of my longer piece. And as you can see, half of my yellow cloud is on the left and then the other half is on the right. If I had my zipper on the left side, like the pattern hack, the whole panel would look like one big picture, but now it looks like there's a break between the left side of the zipper and the right side of the zipper. For this pattern, it's not a big deal because the print is so busy. I still wanted to mention this just in case you want to cut a print fabric or fabric with shapes or faces that need to look uniform. This is definitely something to keep in mind. My suggestion is if it is your first time trying the hack, it might be a good idea to try with plain fabric first. This information is available in the blog post, but just to remind you, the bigger piece is going to be 7.5 inches wide by 7.25 inches tall. And the smaller piece is going to be 2 1/8 inches wide by 7.25 inches tall. Another point that I'm not sure if the pattern hack mentioned is that the zipper needs to close up. I mean, need is a strong word. You can do whatever you want with your zipper, but I think it would be more convenient and secure to have the zipper closing upward. One last consideration that I would like to share is when you sew the gusset. For this bag, I used vinyl for my exterior gusset pieces and my strap tabs. And for the lining, I used waterproof 8.7 ounce polyester ripstop fabric. I used the Janome HD9 to sew this bag, and for the needle, I used the Microtex 100. So I thought I was prepared for bulky seams. However, my machine and my needle really struggled to sew this seam, and I can understand that. This seam has the top gusset with the zipper, a strap, tab, and also the bottom gusset. In other words, it's got a lot of layers, especially the top stitching part, which is why you see that the line is not completely straight here. Because I wanted to top stitch as close to the strap tab as I could, I used a zipper foot. Even with my hump jumper, my zipper foot could not go over the hump in the middle. So I ended up having to unpick the stitches and try again with my walking foot, which fortunately was able to get over the hump in the middle. But it couldn't get as close to the strap tab as the zipper foot could, which is why my top stitching line kind of meanders out in the middle. So the lesson here is that if I want to use vinyl again for this bag, I would increase the top stitching seam allowance from 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 inch so that I can achieve a straight line with my walking foot. So there you go, another point to consider when choosing your materials. Finally, it is time to test the bag. Is this bag going to be my new travel companion? Let's start with the cargo pocket. I can put my pen in there and also my chapstick. And the most important thing, tissue! They all fit with plenty of room to spare. Moving on to the bag zipper pocket. Usually I would put my phone in this pocket, but it doesn't look like it's going to fit. I'm going to try anyway. So my phone is too big for this pocket. It is an iPhone Pro Max. If you have a smaller phone, it might fit. But hey, my passport would fit. Ta-da! Now that we're done with the exterior pockets, we're gonna open the bag and put stuff inside. I think my phone is going to fit in that slip pocket. There we go. Lots of room in there. And then we also have another zipper pocket in which I could put my keys, safe and secure. And all I have left now are my wallet and my water bottle. Zip it up, and now I am ready for my next adventure. That's it for my review of the Ojyma Crossbody. I hope that this video inspires you to give this pattern a try. Enjoy sewing and see you in the next video. Bye!